Go with the home team, Mississippi Farm Bureau. Kendall, always appreciate your time, especially when you join us from a ballpark, regardless of the age of the baseball players. What's up, my man?
I am doing well. I wish it would have been a better weekend for the state of Mississippi, though.
Yeah, and it was close to being a better weekend all the way around. Let's start with Southern Miss, as we have the last few weeks. They lose 2 of 3 at UAB. I'm assuming that the margin for error for Southern Miss is not as big as it would be for some teams, but have they built enough cushion that they're able to kind of withstand that weekend, assuming they get back to playing the kind of ball they have been playing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, number one, I think once they get healthy, they'll be fine. But obviously, they're missing Reese Ewing. Slade Wilkes comes out of the game. I think it was Friday with an injury. And so, I think once they get healthy, they'll be fine. I think they're getting Ewing back here in a couple of weeks. But, I think right now, I'm not sure they're a top 8 at this point. Their RPI dropped in mid-teens. The resume isn't fantastic when you look at the metrics. So they're probably in that 9 to 16 range. But, they're in striking distance of a top 8. They're going to have to finish really strong. They're also going to have to play very well in the Conference USA tournament. But, their goals are still attainable. It's just they just had a setback over the weekend, and the RPI took a hit because of it.
And the schedule is, it's not easy, but they're the best team, obviously, against everybody else they play down the road. But they've still got UTSA to play. They've got a midweek game with South Alabama tonight. They've got Old Dominion who can swing it, and then they finish up with Middle Tennessee, who pitches it pretty well. It's not an easy 11-game finishing stretch for the Golden Eagles.
No, it's not. The one saving grace, if I'm not mistaken, the Conference USA tournament is at the Pete this year. So the one that's going to help them is even if they have another stumble somewhere, they can kind of afford to have one because guess what? They're going to be at home in their conference tournament. If they roll through that thing and win it, then all of a sudden you've got a regular season crown and a conference tournament crown. And we all know the committee really likes that. So they have ways to make up for it, but you certainly can't afford to have more than about one series loss the rest of the regular season, if even that.
All right, so what is the magic RPI number in conjunction with the magic win total in conference play for an SEC team to be part of the field of 64?
Well, so, you had Alabama last year who got in. What was it, 12 or 13 wins, if I'm not mistaken? I'm trying to remember exactly how many wins they had. I think it was 12 or 13.
I think it was 12 in the league before Hoover. Yeah,
exactly. And I think they won 2 games in Hoover. So, that's kind of your bar here recently. I remember one year Florida, I think it was 14 wins or 13 wins, got in. But that year that Florida's RPI was 17 or 18. So here's the thing about Mississippi State and Ole Miss. If you're an SEC team and your conference record is bad, you have to have something to offset that. So in the case of Florida that one year, they had a really good RPI. The problem you run into with Mississippi State and Ole Miss is the fact that not only do they have bad league records, they do not have the RPI that offsets that. So both of those teams, have a lot to do down the stretch. Mississippi State, that Missouri series was a killer because if they win that series, I think I'm actually feeling okay about them getting in range, getting at large by the end of the year. All of a sudden now they're kind of back to square one. So both of those teams are going to have to finish incredibly strong because right now they have no way to offset any of their negative marks.
All right, so Mississippi State, I'm looking at the RPI on D1 baseball right now, currently at 88 in the RPI. Ooh. They are sitting at, 9 conference wins. So if they go 5-4 and win their 2 remaining non-conference games, 5-4 in the league to get to 14 conference wins, that RPI is still going to be in the 50s. Will that be enough?
That's going to be close. That really may be one of those situations to where, if they're let's say 49 or 50, they've got 14 wins, and let's say they win one in Hoover to get to 15. That really could be. I know people hate it, but that could be one of those things where it's like, hey, the defending national champions, we kind of give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit. So, I think in that situation they would have a chance.
In terms of RPI, Ole Miss has got a little more wiggle room, but they've got to do more in terms of wins because Ole Miss is at 58 in the RPI, but they're sitting there with only 7 conference wins. So to get to 14 conference wins, good grief, that's a really strong finish, right? That's 7-2.
Yeah, I had them with the remaining schedule winning 11 games. So, here's 2 ways to think about it. Ole Miss historically plays very well in Hoover. So let's just say they end the regular season 11 wins. I mean, I get it. Like they've shown no reason for us to have confidence in them. But this is a team that if they can get to Hoover, get a little bit of a home crowd, they can get hot and win 3 games and put themselves in position to make the postseason. I'm not saying I'm betting on that, but even if they get to 11 wins, I mean, there's still a pathway. It's just a very difficult pathway.
All right, in terms of the Governor's Cup, the game that Ole Miss and Mississippi State played last week, we know that doesn't count, obviously, in the SEC standings, but does the committee look at that as a league win? So in actuality, does Ole Miss have 8 conference wins right now as opposed to 7?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, actually. Technically, even though it's a midweek game, that's considered a conference win. So, yeah, technically they would have 8 conference wins in the eyes of the committee. With that said, the committee is not stupid. I mean, they're going to look at that and go, okay, well, that's a midweek game. So, I mean, it theoretically it carries the same weight, but it really doesn't.
All right, let's switch to
sense at all.
It does. I'm with you. Let's switch to a different college baseball topic. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about Tennessee, and we like Tennessee as the villain. I said I think that's good for college baseball. I feel like Tony Vitello may have gone a step too far last week. What are you hearing in terms of reaction to taking the bat and throwing it back toward the Auburn players? Is this thing hanging on the edge of being out of control in Knoxville?
I mean, it could be. I mean, here's the deal. All it takes is one person. And if you notice, guys, when that all went down, Tim Hudson, who's a very quiet guy, like he comes out of the dugout and kind of starts going after him. Notice that Tony backed down whenever he did that. And I think the way you handle this deal is like, hey, if they're going to – you kind of fight fire with fire. If they're going to start running their mouth or they're going to start coming after people, then you kind of come back at them because, you know, history would suggest when you watch Tennessee that – I'm not saying on the field, but just in terms of their attitude towards other teams, they kind of back down a little bit when you kind of come after them. So I think Tim Hudson had enough, and I think he probably resonated with Tony a little bit, that a guy like Hudson who's seen a lot in the big leagues kind of went after him. But, number one, I mean, if you're Bobby Pierce from Auburn, you can't toss your bat toward the dugout. Number two, their dugouts are entirely too close to the home plate to begin with. Somebody, made a good point over the weekend that, man, their field, like their home dugout is literally on top of the plate. Not literally, but it's close, So it was an unfortunate deal. But, yeah, you cannot be throwing a bat into a crowd of baseball players that aren't expecting a bat. I mean, imagine if that would have hit somebody in the back of the head. Imagine what kind of penalty that he's looking at. So, the other thing about Tennessee, Richard, that it's starting to kind of drive me crazy is every time a team gets chippy with them, like they complain about it. Like the other night, Auburn gets chippy with them after they beat them. And what happens? Tennessee's literally yapping the whole way to their post-game meeting. And it's just got like how can you be vocal, which I love. Like I actually love the fact they're chippy and vocal. But like how can you have that be your identity and then get mad when somebody else has that identity? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I described it yesterday as there was that guy in high school who was always looking for a reason to fight and never backed away from it. And then it's kind of funny when you see that guy, finally somebody stands up to him and punches him. And the demeanor changes a little bit.
I mean, unfortunately, I honestly think it's one of those things. Like, I'm not going to rag on kids, but honestly think it's one of those things. Like, it's like the guy who punches you runs off. Like, honestly, kind of feel like that's the way they are. Like, they're gonna be loud and kind of go after you, but if you come after them, they're gonna backpedal and yell at you as somebody fake holds them back. Yeah.
Is Auburn the biggest surprise in the SEC, sitting at 4 right now in the RPI?
I think that, it would be either them or A&M. What Schloss has done at A&M this year with their turnover is pretty remarkable, to be honest with you. I mean, the fact that they're even in the discussion for top 8 or top 16 right now. But when you look at Butch and the job they've done, when I saw them opening weekend, even though they went 2-1 opening weekend at Globe Life, I didn't think they were a great team. Like, I thought they looked very average. But, if you look at that team overall, we almost moved them up after a series loss to Tennessee. That's how good I thought they looked. Blake Rambish has been really good offensively for them. Bobby Pierce obviously is heating up. You got Sonny D in the middle of that lineup. But then when you look at the pitching, Joe Gonzalez, shut Tennessee down for, five innings over the weekend. So I really like their club. They're battle-tested. They're hard-nosed. They're a really fun club to watch.
8 of the 14 teams in the SEC have a losing record. Give me one team that gets hot in the final 3 weeks. We got 30 seconds left, Kendall.
one team that can get hot the final few weeks of all the bottom feeders.
Yep, of the 8 teams with a losing record.
Oh my gosh! I mean, maybe Mississippi State. I mean,
okay.
I just have no faith in Florida or Ole Miss. I'm sure to go with Mississippi State. I think that they've shown flashes. I think they have a flair for the dramatic a little bit with Hunter Hines and Logan Tanner. Like, I just feel like those guys, like Logan, just isn't going to let that team kind of fold over and die at the end of the year. So I'm just going to go with Mississippi State. Do I feel very confident about that? Not really.